Picture this, a teenage kid in South Central Los Angeles. No money, no connections, no future. At least that's what everyone around him believed. But this kid could play tennis. And not just play it, he dominated. By his junior year at Susan Miller Dorsey High School, he had the attention of a recruiter from Cal State Long Beach. A scholarship was right there. One signature away from a completely different life. But then the coaches found out something nobody had bothered to check. This kid couldn't read. He couldn't write. He couldn't pass a single test. And just like that, the scholarship vanished. The future vanished. And a boy named Ricky Donald Ross was left standing at a crossroads with only one question. What now? What happened next would change American history. It would fuel an epidemic that destroyed entire communities. It would expose a conspiracy that reached all the way to the CIA, and it would turn one illiterate teenager from the streets of Los Angeles into one of the most powerful drug dealers the world has ever seen. This is the true story of Freeway Rick Ross. Ricky Donald Ross was born on January 26, 1960, in Troop, Texas. When he was 3, his family moved to Los Angeles, to South Central. They settled near Interstate 110, the Harbor Freeway. That freeway would later become the source of his famous nickname. Growing up in South Central in the 1960s and 70s was not easy. Poverty was everywhere. Gang activity was constant. The Bloods and the Crips owned the streets. Young Ricky was always hustling, mowing lawns, selling lemonade, pumping gas. His mother kept a tight household and kept him away from the gangs as long as she could. But Ricky was already showing signs of the ambition that would one day build an empire. Even if that empire would be built on the wrong side of the law. The one thing that almost saved him was a tennis racket. Ross picked up the sport as a teenager and took to it immediately. By high school, he was one of the best players in Los Angeles. He trained relentlessly. Dorsey High School was producing scholarship players. One of his teammates, Larry Barnett, went on to play at UC Santa Barbara, posting a 26-1 singles record and winning Big West Conference titles in 1980 and 1982. Ross was on that same trajectory. A recruiter from Cal State Long Beach had his eye on him. But here's the part of the story that changes everything. Ricky Ross had never learned how to read or write. The school system had let him slip through year after year without addressing it. And when Cal State Long Beach found out, the answer was immediate. No scholarship. No college. No way forward, at least not the legitimate one. Ross himself has said it plainly, it was pretty simple. They said we can't accept you here not being able to read and write and pass the SATs. The door to one life closed. And another door, a very dark one, opened. Ross briefly attended Los Angeles Trade Technical College, but didn't stay long. In 1979, he first saw crack cocaine. At first, he didn't even recognize it as a drug. It looked different from the heroin, the PCP, the marijuana he saw every day. Curious, he bought a small amount for $50. The next day, he sold it for $100. Double his money. In 24 hours. Ross has said he tried using cocaine himself at one point, but failed to get high from it. That kept him on the business side. The side where the real money was. At first, the operation was small. He got his supply from an upholstery teacher at a community college who dealt on the side. Gram by gram, it grew. His supplier connected him to a man named Avon Arguelles, who provided larger quantities at better prices. Within months, Ross had moved from grams to ounces. Then Arguelles was shot in the spine and forced out of the business. His brother-in-law, Henry Corrales, took over, but Corrales needed a new connection. And that connection was about to change everything. The name that would define Freeway Rick Ross's story, for better and for worse, was Oscar Danilo Blandón. Blandón was a Nicaraguan exile, a cocaine distributor, and, as it would later be revealed, a man with deep ties to a political war being waged thousands of miles away in Central America. Blandón had heard about Ross. Word on the streets was that this young kid from South Central was moving more cocaine than anyone else in the area. He reached out and offered to supply Ross directly, at prices nobody else could match. Where Ross had been buying cocaine at $60,000 per kilo, Blandón could get it to him for as low as $10,000. Ross began undercutting every other dealer in Los Angeles. If you wanted cocaine in LA, you came to him. By 1982, Ross was a millionaire. He had earned his nickname, Freeway Ricky, and was claiming to sell up to $3 million worth of cocaine in a single day. He was purchasing as much as 1,000 pounds per week. Blandón didn't just supply him, he mentored him. He taught Ross how to scale, how to manage operations, how to think like a businessman. And Ross, with his natural instinct for competition, honed on the tennis court, absorbed every lesson. By the mid-1980s, Freeway Rick Ross wasn't just a drug dealer. He was an empire. Ross ran his operation with corporate-level precision. He supplied lawyers to employees who got into legal trouble. He offered preferential rates to loyal buyers. He employed thousands of people across his network. His distribution stretched across 42 cities: St. Louis, New Orleans, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Seattle, Cleveland, and more. His most profitable markets were in Ohio. Federal prosecutors would later estimate that between 1982 and 1989, Ross bought and resold several metric tons of cocaine. His gross earnings exceeded $900 million. His profit was nearly $300 million. Some days, he made more than $2 million in a single 24 hours. Ross invested heavily in real estate across Southern California. Houses, motels, apartment buildings, he lost count. He paid his mother a weekly allowance. He even invested money into Anita Baker's first music album. He also lived dangerously. Ross wore a bulletproof vest everywhere. He carried a 9mm revolver at all times. But his operation used police scanners and voice scramblers to stay ahead of law enforcement. For years, nobody could touch him. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department began investigating Ross in 1985. They couldn't make a single arrest. So in January 1987, the LASD and the LAPD formed a dedicated task force. 9 officers focused entirely on taking down Freeway Rick Ross. They called themselves the Southwest Crew. Everyone else called them the Freeway Ricky Task Force. What happened next was not justice. In April 1987, officers chased Ross on foot. When he escaped, they planted a kilo of cocaine along the route he had run and claimed he had dropped it. The charges were dismissed because of police misconduct. The task force was deeply corrupt. Members had been stealing drug money and possessions from dealers for years. Between 1989 and 1991, 35 deputy sheriffs and 6 other individuals were prosecuted in 11 separate trials. Ross spent 3 days on the witness stand testifying against them. In exchange, his sentence from his first drug conviction was reduced from 121 months to 51. He served time in Ohio and Texas. By the early 1990s, he was out. After his release, Ross tried to move on. He had businesses. He had enough money to survive without the drug trade. He planned to turn a theater he had purchased into a community center. Then Oscar Danilo Blandón called. Blandón offered Ross $300,000 to broker one final deal. Ross made the introduction, but the buyer was an undercover D agent. On March 2, 1995, federal agents moved in. They found Ross beside a Chevy Blazer packed with 100 kilograms of cocaine. Blandón, the man who had supplied Ross for over a decade, had become a full-time paid informant for the United States government. He had handed Ross directly to the DEA. On November 19, 1996, Judge Marilyn Huff sentenced Ricky Donald Ross to life in prison. It was his 3rd felony conviction. Under federal law, that triggered a mandatory life sentence. No exceptions. No discretion. And here is the cruel irony that would become one of the most debated issues in American criminal justice. Ross was sentenced for crack cocaine. Had the same quantity been in powder form, the guidelines would have been drastically different. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 had created a 100-to-1 disparity between crack and powder cocaine. 5 grams of crack carried a mandatory 5-year sentence. To trigger that same sentence with powder cocaine, you needed 500 grams, 100 times more. The U.S. Sentencing Commission would later call this disparity unjustified. In 2010, Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act, reducing the ratio to 18-to-1. But that was 14 years too late for Freeway Rick Ross. Inside prison, Ross decided to teach himself to read. He started with his own indictment, reading it word by word, teaching himself the alphabet as he went. Once he started, he didn't stop. He blazed through law books. He read over 300 books during his time behind bars. And it was in those law books that he found something no one else had noticed. While Ross sat in prison, the outside world was catching up to a story that had been buried for over a decade. In August 1996, the same year Ross was sentenced, investigative journalist Gary Webb published a 3-part series in the San Jose Mercury News. He called it Dark Alliance. Webb's investigation revealed that Blandón had ties to the Nicaraguan Contras, a rebel group fighting to overthrow the socialist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. And the United States Central Intelligence Agency had been funding them. The Contras had been financing their war effort partly through cocaine sales in Los Angeles. The same cocaine that flowed through Ross's operation. The same cocaine that had fueled the crack epidemic across American cities. The implication was staggering. The CIA had, at the very least, looked the other way while drugs flooded into the poorest black communities in the country. Some alleged direct knowledge and protection of the trafficking. Dark Alliance became a sensation. It sparked protests, congressional investigations, and town hall meetings across African American communities. The story confirmed something many people had long suspected, that the government had a hand in the crack epidemic that devastated their neighborhoods. It was only after Webb's articles that Ross learned the full truth about Blandón. He had been sold out by a man working for the government the entire time. Ross had been a pawn in a much larger game. Gary Webb's career was destroyed by the backlash. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times all questioned his reporting. His own newspaper distanced itself from the series. Webb resigned in 1997. He died in 2004 at 49. But later investigations, including by the CIA's own Inspector General, corroborated many of his core findings. Back in prison, Ross had been studying the law for years, and he found it. His life sentence had been imposed under the federal three strikes law. The government had counted his Texas conviction and his Ohio conviction as two separate prior offenses. 2 strikes. This new conviction made 3. Life mandatory. But Ross discovered that the Texas and Ohio convictions had actually stemmed from the same drug conspiracy. Under federal law, they should have counted as 1 strike, not 2. His first lawyer laughed him off the phone. So Ross petitioned the court for a new attorney. Together, they brought the case to a federal court of appeals. The court agreed. The 3 strikes law had been erroneously applied. Ross's sentence was reduced from life to 20 years. He had already served 14. On September 29, 2009, he walked out of the Federal Correctional Institution in Texarkana, Texas, a free man. He walked out broke. His properties had been seized. His money had been eaten by lawyers and the government. His associates had disappeared. He was 49, with a criminal record, no savings, and a name that most people now associated with a rapper who had stolen it. After prison, Ross started from nothing. He moved between living in his car and staying with his mother. He couldn't get a bank loan. But he had something he didn't have before. He could read. He could study. He could think strategically, and he had 300 books worth of knowledge to draw from. He started speaking at schools, in prisons, at community centers. He told young people the truth about what the drug trade had done to him and to the people around him. Not to glorify it, to warn against it. In 2014, he published his autobiography, co-written with journalist Kathy Scott. It was nominated for a Forward Reviews Award in the True Crime category. In 2015, he was the subject of an Emmy-nominated documentary, Freeway Crack in the System, which laid bare the connections between the drug trade, the Iran-Contra affair, and mass incarceration. His life directly inspired the FX television series Snowfall, one of the most acclaimed crime dramas in recent history. In 2022, Ross launched a boxing management company. He entered the legal cannabis industry, opening a dispensary called LA Kingpins in Los Angeles. He trains his children in tennis, the sport that almost saved him the first time around. Today, Ross tours the country. He speaks at schools, community events, and conferences. His message is simple. The same mind that built a drug empire can build something legitimate. The same hustle, the same hunger, just aimed in the right direction. So what do we take away from the story of Freeway Rick Ross? The system failed him before he failed himself. An illiterate kid slipped through the American education system without anyone stepping in. The one door that could have changed his life was closed because of a problem the system had created. The drug trade doesn't just destroy users. It destroys the people who sell it. Ross made hundreds of millions of dollars and lost everything: his freedom, his family stability, his future. The crack versus powder cocaine sentencing disparity was one of the most racially unjust policies in modern American history. A 100-to-1 ratio that disproportionately sent black men to prison for decades. Congress finally acted in 2010, but for Ross, and for hundreds of thousands like him, the damage was already done. The CIA connection remains one of the most explosive chapters in American political history. Whether the government orchestrated the crack epidemic or simply looked the other way, the consequences fell on the people who could least afford them. And Freeway Rick Ross is living proof that it is never too late to change. He learned to read at 28. He taught himself the law. He walked out of a life sentence and rebuilt from zero. The tennis court that never was. Ross is still on it, just playing a different game now. This has been the true story of Freeway Rick Ross. If this video hit you, subscribe. Share it. Because this is a story the world needs to hear.